welcome to PCB Chat, where we talk with experts across the printed circuit design, manufacturing, and electronic supply chain fields. I'm Mike Buetow, president of the PCEA. Our guest today launched his company at almost the same time I joined PCEA, and so I feel something of a kinship in that regard. Moreover, the company, which is called Breadboard, was founded on the heels of the supply chain breakdown caused by the COVID pandemic. All in all, I'd say it was a time that was ripe for disruption. Please let me welcome Zachary Feuerstein, the founder and CEO of Breadboard.
Hey, Mike, it's great to hear from you.
Breadboard was officially launched in March 2022 with the very modest goal of revolutionizing the electronic supply chain management industry. So let's start there with Breadboard itself, since I don't know that the company is all that well known yet in the industry. You founded the company with the goal to develop a software platform that automates and streamlines the quoting and procurement processes for electronic components, in part through faster BOM processing and through cost comparison and optimization. And I'm grossly condensing your solutions. So why don't you tell the listeners a bit about them?
Yeah, happy to tell you about it. As you said, Breadboard is a supply chain software that's specifically designed for electronics manufacturers from the ground up. Our platform really focuses on that automation and optimization as well of quoting, procurement, supply chain monitoring, and really allows electronics manufacturers to focus what they're experts at, which is actually manufacturing and building products. In 2024, while everybody's using modern smartphones like the latest iPhone and tools like ChatGPT, unfortunately, the electronics industry with its existing tools still is doing a ton of manual work, ranging from cleaning up bills of materials and packages from PDFs and Excel to get it into the right system, or sending out RFQs to each one of their suppliers by hand and having to track that in an email inbox. And the same thing goes on purchasing. There's only about 40% of purchase orders in this industry that happen without even a single part having an issue on it. Imagine only 40% of your Amazon purchases got delivered on time without a problem. You'd be freaking out, right? So really what we've done here at Breadboard is built a software that's changed that and making electronic supply chain as easy as switching from that BlackBerry that, unfortunately the electronics industry is still using to a modern smartphone like the latest iPhone. So that's a little bit about us. Obviously, there's a million things under the hood that I'd be happy to share with you, but hopefully that gives a great overview to the people listening.
So my friends at RIM probably won't like the analogy, but I completely get the point that you're making here. So are you suggesting then that this process can be fully automated with no manual intervention whatsoever?
I wouldn't say fully automated, right? In any decision where especially there's money on the line, right? You want the tools to automate the manual work to give you the information you need and then allow the user to make the best judgment call based on that information. So really where we focus is, hey, can we automate using the latest and greatest technology, the manual processes to go into the information and get it and summarize it in a way that's easiest for anybody to understand, and then allow you to make that final adjustment or final call to make sure that's what you want to do to move forward. So we're never going to take the human out of that process. We actually think that's a terrible idea, but we can take a process that might be taking you 5 hours or 10 hours of manual work down to 3 to 5 minutes, right? And focus on, imagine, right, like when you're going to, book an airline to go on vacation, instead of having to go to each different site, Delta and JetBlue and Southwest and everything out there and manually check it, compare all those prices, you now have Google Flights, right, where you can just say, hey, I want to travel here to here, with all this information. And then it gives you the information to make that very quick decision and most effective cost. We're doing the exact same thing for electronics.
Again, I love the analogy. So the idea is that through using Breadboard, customers can cut labor and material costs, and through the faster quote process, they're likely to win more business as well.
Yeah, so we're really seeing a few different factors and where we're bringing return on investment to our customers. So the first is definitely, right, that labor cost if you're in the US especially, it's very hard to compete with global manufacturers where maybe they have reduced costs in terms of their average employee. So being able to do things faster and more effectively is super important in terms of being able to compete. So step one, right? How do we take a process that would have taken you, call it 5-10 hours, bring that into like 5-10 minutes maximum, save a bunch of time there. But more importantly, we also help in two other ways. So one is, as you said, if you can respond back to your customers faster and with a better quote, you're going to win more deals. We're typically seeing our average customer increase their win rates on deals by about 10 to 15% within the first 3 months. And then in addition to that, because they're looking at much more data in a much more effective way with the tools to make better decisions, we're also seeing our customers save anywhere between 3 to 5% on their component savings. So think about, we work with both EMS companies as well as OEMs. The EMS companies, right, they really care about those win rates, right, answering quotes back faster. But the OEMs we work with, right, they think about, hey, I have 5, 10, 15 product lines. How do I make sure I'm actually optimizing my component spend? How do I make sure if I benchmark against the competition, I'm getting the best prices? All of that's factored into our tool to really help them, get the best price and make sure that they're running their supply chain not only most effectively from a process standpoint, but also from a cash perspective as well.
This episode of PCB Chat is sponsored by PCB West, the largest conference and exhibition for printed circuit board design, fabrication, and assembly in the Silicon Valley. For more than 30 years, PCB West has trained designers, engineers, fabricators, and lately assemblers on making printed circuit boards for every product or use imaginable. More than 2,000 designers, fabricators, assemblers, and engineers register, and more than 100 companies exhibit each year at the 4-day technical conference and 1-day sold-out exhibition. From high-reliability military aerospace to cutting-edge IoT and wearables, there's something for everyone involved in the electronic supply chain. This is one show you cannot afford to miss. Visit PCBWest.com today to register. Have you done any studies, or were you able to collect any data from the customers you're working with in terms of the length of a typical quote process?
So it really depends on the types of quotes you're doing, right? So if you're a quick turn shop here in the US and you're working a lot on prototypes, even though it is taking the average team still about a week to respond most of the time, the expectation from the consumer is sub 24 hours to get that response. And there are not that many players that are actually doing that. And that's why we see about 25 to 30% of the first quotes win on a quick turn prototype job. When you're starting to go into production, maybe more complicated builds in the medical, the aerospace location, we're seeing closer to 2 to 3 weeks there. But the truth is, it's still really important to get your customer much faster than that. But because what we're seeing is, when you're the first to respond, it doesn't necessarily mean they're just going to auto choose you immediately. But when somebody else responds later, they're going to reference back your quote and typically give you a call and say to you, hey, I noticed maybe you're a little bit more expensive or you're doing things differently. Why? Right? And then you get that extra opportunity to engage with them, which can help increase your win rates on even those larger production runs as well.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when a company advertises itself as being quick turn, and maybe they can do a 5 to 7 day turn, but their quote itself takes that long, right? I mean, there's something inherently contradictory about that.
There definitely is. And I think, the 5 to 7 days is also totally dependent on, can they source those components? Can they get them shipped there? And as I was saying, only 40% of POs don't have any issues on it, have none, right? And you get delivered on time. So the quoting is one part of it. And definitely, yes, as you said, you got to get there quickly. But also, once you win that deal, right, 5 to 7 days for the consumer, they don't care, right? If it's turnkey on like you sourcing the components, they just want that device. So you need the tools to be able to say, okay, I can actually meet that, right? And I can actually get these components delivered that quickly so that I can go build this product as well.
So how exactly do you go about all this? In other words, what is behind your platform engine and what inputs are you using in order to make this process faster?
There's a lot of different parts to it. But, to start, we can talk about turning what we call unstructured data into structured data. So whether that be a bill of materials that's in a PDF or Word doc, whether that be a email that's over text or has an attachment located to it with a invoice or a RFQ, we've built tools combination between scanning documents, understanding them, training on previous documents to take that data that's taken, in a very unclean format and put it into a format that a computer can understand. So that's like piece one to it, right? Is being able to take that messy data and put it into machine readable way that our servers can analyze. And then we've also connected with the market, right, in terms of bringing in all the best data. So we've built partnerships with most of the distributors out there to be able to pull in not only generic pricing and stock and information, but also our customers' specific pricing and registration and everything like that into our system. And then we've also partnered with manufacturers to pull in technical specifications, data sheets, pull in compliance details, and a lot more. So by having this engine, right, that can take unstructured data, put it into machine readable format, get the best market data, and then use a bunch of our algorithms that can be customized based on your specific use case, you can automate 80 to 90% of the manual work that electronics manufacturers are doing every day. We really try to help them move that needle.
And the company is called Breadboard. Is the platform called Breadboard as well?
Yeah, it's, single name. We kind of did it based on the prototyping tool, Breadboard. We thought it would be, a nice nod to it without being too direct there. We definitely get mixed feelings about it. We get some people that ask us, like, do you sell sourdough and different types of bread? And it's like, not exactly, but, the people who actually matter in the electronics industry get it. And, it's just a nice little wink towards them.
Can the platform make recommendations for other parts based on availability? So, example, if you have all the data sheets stored and you need a package size of this particular dimension and this particular electrical characteristics, and the availability is poor, or at least with your typical vendors it's poor, will Breadboard recommend an alternate part?
Yeah. So what we do is we look at the data sheets to understand, what's a form fit function alternate. And you can always get them for every part. We have it for every actively traded component. We have all the form fit function alternates, but we also have it for components that potentially are going obsolete or have issues there. And we'll suggest that to you when we see a potential issue. So stock is one use case. Obsolescence is another. We're also seeing when prices get too high. So sometimes, there's a component and for whatever reason, a lot of people want it at a given point in time. The price skyrockets, right? And the question is, do you really want to pay that, or can you replace that with an alternate that does the exact same thing? Now, we've also built the approval processes within our platform to make sure that you're allowed to do that, whether it be a customer approving that, whether it be your internal engineering team or anything like that. You can also upload your own and manage your own alternates if you have, right, those built in. So all of that's within our app, and we're constantly building out more intelligence about that to make sure that you don't have to go back to your engineering team or client and delay an entire project just because the part's out of stock or is going obsolete in the next 6 months.
And when I first came across you, it was back in March 2022. I think there was an announcement you'd received quite a bit of money in outside funding, but I don't recall whether Breadboard had a product in the market at that point or whether you were just about going to market. Either way, what's the platform status right now? Obviously, you are working with customers and you do have a saleable, marketable product.
Yeah, so in March 2022, when we launched and we raised our initial funding, it was just an idea. I was a consumer. It was the middle of the supply chain crisis. My fridge broke and the motherboard needed to be replaced. And I was also trying to get access to the new PlayStation 5. And both I was told there would be massive delays to get. And I was like, I understand there are supply chain crisis right now happening in all the industries, but this seems different, right? And really, I did a bunch of research in that area, and that's where I met you. I was calling up to learn from, experts in the space and say, hey, I just want to learn more about this. Like, why is this happening? And obviously it's multi-layered, right? And we think there are two main causes to it. One being what we're working on today, right? Which is the manual process of trading these components slows down everything. And in a supply chain crisis where data is changing faster than you can trade, you got to restart all over again. So that's problem one. And then two is a demand forecasting problem, which we're really working on to, fix the underlying causes of why a fab in Taiwan might not really understand what demand looks like 5 to 7 years down the line. And given it takes about 5 to 7 years to build a new factory, that's super key. So that's a little background on March of 2022. We launched our platform at the end of that year in 2022. And since then, over the past, call it year and a half, have brought on about 60 to 70 different customers who are a mix between EMS companies as well as electronics OEMs. We've really been focusing mostly in the United States and North America more generally, but we're getting a lot of interest from, Asia and Europe, and we're starting to have those conversations where they're, most effective.
The loss of the fridge, you can live without that, right? But the PS5, it's unimaginable.
That's the priority. I feel the exact same way.
How big is Breadboard today? How many employees do you have?
Yeah, so it's 10 of us, all here based out of our New York City headquarters. We really think it's super, super important, especially since we're working with US manufacturers, to be doing everything here, right? Like, we hear all the time that, everything's being outsourced and the promise of reshoring isn't really happening. The CHIPS Act is great, but we're not seeing any of this. And we think if we're going to say, hey, we care about American and United States manufacturing, we got to stand by that. So everything from our engineering to our product to our sales to our support is done here in the United States out of our headquarters. And obviously, I'd love to be maybe more in the sun, but it's great being here and having our whole team together.
So we talked a little bit about, your Eureka moment, right? With the PS5 and the fridge. But what we haven't talked about really is your background and your experience. What led you to this industry at this in this particular point in time? Every company has to do procurement and quoting, no matter what industry they supply to, of course. So there's always a market. But you're coming not from the electronics industry, but from some other very interesting areas that have nothing to do with our traditional procurement processes. So, how do you go from where you were at with I think there was a GitHub and Etsy and some things like that, and there was an educational learning company. How do you go from there to here?
Yeah, so a little background about me. I've always grown up around electronics. My father is an electrical engineer. We always in our house, things would break, whether it be the TV or our toaster. And, my dad would use that as an opportunity to say, hey, we got to fix this, even though my mom was like, let's just buy the new toaster, what are you doing wasting your Sunday on this? But it was a great learning experience, and I've always loved it. I actually got my degree in electrical and computer engineering as well, mostly focused on CPU design. So that's a little bit about my educational background. But when I graduated, I was thinking about what I wanted to do. And to be frank, right, software was the hot thing, right? Paying a lot more money at the time, and saw that as a great opportunity. So I started my first company actually as a senior in college in the education technology space, as you mentioned, helping university students get involved with academic research. Was a great success from a product perspective. We had tens of thousands of students using our platform. Unfortunately, the education space does not have a lot of money. So we ended up selling it to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to run as a non-for-profit. And then I spent a bunch of years at some larger companies, as you mentioned, Etsy, doing some data engineering there, and then met up with that same co-founder of mine from that first company where we started a new company profiling every single doctor in the world and helping life science and medical device companies figure out who to work with on clinical trials, publications, and much more. But really, like the core behind all of this is how can we use technology to solve problems in a way that you couldn't before, right? And that happens for a few different reasons, whether it be technology itself advances enough that you can then automate and do things you couldn't before. But it also means industries are ready to adopt those things, right? And I think, as horrible as the supply chain crisis was for the electronics manufacturing industry, it also shook it, right? And it said, hey, wait a minute, right? Like, we got to wake up here and make some fundamental changes if we want to still be here in 10, 20, 30 years. And that gave us a great opportunity, not only from a technical side of being able to use APIs and running some machine learning algorithms, but it also brought the point in time where the industry was ready to start using those technologies. And that's kind of the perfect time, in my opinion, to start a company. And yeah, it's been great, and love to see the adoption so far by everyone.
On LinkedIn, you had some thoughts about what the acquisition of Altium by Renaissance means for the supply chain. I think you called it a, quote, pivotal signal for all electronics manufacturers. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, financing is very, very interesting topic, especially now, right? We've seen a lot less IPOs over the last 2 years. We're no longer in a zero interest rate policy environment. Financing can be complicated, and what it means is if you don't have a way to long-term, make money for the businesses that you're starting, you have less incentive to do it, right? And there's less innovation. What that showed, right, is that there is capital in this space for good and valuable software and manufacturing, right? And people are willing to invest in it. And I think that was a great signal to everybody to say, hey, we still need to innovate here in this industry because there is capital for it and a return for you from a financial perspective. So while it's no longer a zero interest rate policy environment, and maybe fundraising is a little bit harder, or there's less private equity investments in electronics manufacturing, there is still something here, right? And still really important, and we shouldn't let this just go to be a global type thing. We should still keep it here in the United States, and there's a ton of opportunity for people who are willing to jump in and go for it.
Well, Zach, I love spending this time with you. I'm grateful for your thoughts. I wish the best for Breadboard. I think you have a really exciting idea. I haven't had a chance to play with it yet because, frankly, I don't buy parts. But I do hope that folks do check it out. The website is breadboard.com. And I want to say best of luck here. I hope you come back to the show and keep us apprised of what's going on.
Thanks. It was really great talking to you, and hope to be back shortly.
Our guest today has been Zachary Feuerstein, the founder and CEO of Breadboard. For PCB Chat, this is Mike Buetow. Have a nice day.